Christmas Eve is meant to be a night of love, joy, and togetherness. But for one black family, it turned into a nightmare that would leave the world stunned. A racist police officer stormed their home, shattering the peace of the holiday. What happened next wasn't just shocking, it exposed a deeper truth that no one saw coming. In a quiet snow-covered neighborhood, the streets were filled with the warmth of holiday lights and the sound of carolers spreading cheer. Families exchanged gifts, and children laughed under the glow of their Christmas trees. But in one household, the joy was interrupted by a loud knock at the door. This wasn't just any knock, it marked the beginning of an unimaginable injustice. In this video, you'll uncover the chilling details of that night, a baseless accusation, an unjust arrest, and a revelation that turned the tables. What the officer didn't realize was that the man he targeted wasn't just a loving father. He was a highly skilled FBI agent. Stick around until the end as we unravel how this shocking story unfolded and reveal the twist that sent shockwaves across the nation. It was a picture-perfect Christmas Eve. The Smith family, James, a dedicated father and federal agent, Maria, a loving mother and teacher, 12-year-old Marcus, who adored building model trains, and 10-year-old Ava, who couldn't wait to open her gift of art supplies, were gathered. In their cozy living room, the fireplace crackled, and the scent of hot cocoa and freshly baked cookies filled the air. Laughter echoed as the kids begged to open just one present before midnight. For a moment, it felt like nothing could disturb their peace. But then, a loud, forceful knock shattered the tranquility. James exchanged a puzzled look with Maria before heading to the door. On the other side stood a stern-faced police officer, his hand resting on his holster. Without any pleasantries, he demanded to know who lived there. Confused but calm, James explained they were celebrating Christmas with their kids. But the officer's tone turned sharp, accusing the family of trespassing in what he claimed wasn't their home. James tried to reason with him, showing identification and explaining they had lived there for years. But the officer didn't care. His voice grew louder and his stance more aggressive as he accused them of breaking into their own home. Maria stepped in, her voice steady but strained, asking the officer to de-escalate, especially with children present. The kids, once filled with excitement, now clung to their mother, their wide eyes filled with fear. The situation spiraled out of control. Ignoring their protests, the officer barked orders, forcing the family out of the house. James pleaded for the officer to check their records or contact a superior, but it was no use. Handcuffs were slapped onto James and Maria's wrists, and the children, too young to understand the depths of injustice, sobbed as they were ushered into a squad car. The street was silent except for the flashing red and blue lights and the muffled cries of two terrified children. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, but said nothing. In that moment, Christmas was no longer a celebration. It had turned into a nightmare. The cold, fluorescent lights of the police station offered no comfort as the Smith family was ushered inside. James and Maria were separated from their children, who were left sobbing in a corner of the room under the watchful gaze of an indifferent officer. The holiday warmth of their home was now replaced with the sterile chill of institutional injustice. James tried to stay calm, not for himself, but for his family. He watched as Maria was fingerprinted, her hands trembling as she tried to hold back tears. The officers, acting with an air of authority, ignored their pleas and questions. Meanwhile, Marcus and Ava huddled together, their wide eyes darting between the officers and the heavy steel doors, terrified of what might happen next. James remained silent through the process, but there was a fire in his eyes, a quiet defiance that hinted at something the officers hadn't yet realized. One officer sneered as he listed fabricated charges, oblivious to the storm brewing. Then, during the routine ID check, everything changed. The officer's face froze as he read James's credentials. A quiet murmur spread among the others as they crowded around the computer screen. Whispers turned into wide-eyed stares. "You're FBI." The officer finally asked, his voice faltering. James' expression was unreadable as he responded with a calm yes. "And you just made the biggest mistake of your career." The room fell silent. The officers who moments ago had acted with unchecked arrogance now stood frozen, their faces pale with realization. Some stepped back, avoiding eye contact, while others frantically whispered among themselves, trying to piece together how they had just arrested an active federal agent. James, still handcuffed, didn't say another word. He didn't need to. The weight of his authority now hung heavy in the air, suffocating the officers who had allowed their prejudice to blind them to the truth. As the family waited for what would come next, it was clear the tables had turned. The Smiths were no longer victims in this story. They were about to become the architects of justice. The realization hit the officer like a ton of bricks. His once commanding demeanor crumbled as he stumbled over an apology, his words empty and unconvincing. He tried to justify his actions, muttering something about a misunderstanding, but the damage was done. The other officers, sensing the gravity of the situation, scrambled to cover their tracks. One even offered to fix the paperwork, but James' cold, steady gaze stopped them in their tracks. James demanded the immediate release of his family, his voice calm, but carrying an undeniable authority that silenced the room. The officers fumbled to unlock the handcuffs, avoiding eye contact with the man they had wrongfully accused. Maria, holding her terrified children close, refused to look at the officers, her silence speaking volumes. But this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Within hours, news of the incident had leaked. The story of an FBI agent and his family being racially profiled and arrested on Christmas Eve spread like wildfire. Social media lit up with outrage hashtags calling for accountability, trending within the day. Videos of the family being dragged from their home surfaced, sparking protests and demands for justice. As the public outcry grew, the police department had no choice but to act. The officer responsible was placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. His history of complaints previously swept under the rug was now under scrutiny. Calls for his resignation came from every corner, including prominent activists and public figures. The backlash wasn't limited to the officer alone. The entire department faced questions about systemic racism and its failure to address such behavior within its ranks. Press conferences became battlegrounds, with reporters demanding answers that the department struggled to provide. Meanwhile, James stayed out of the spotlight, focusing on his family. But his silence didn't mean inaction. Behind the scenes, he ensured every detail of that night would be accounted for, setting in motion events that would not just hold the officer accountable, but also ignite a broader conversation about justice and equality. The officer, once so confident in his authority, now faced a future filled with uncertainty. The public wasn't just watching, they were demanding change. And this time, there would be no sweeping it under the rug. For the Smith family, the events of that Christmas Eve left scars deeper than anyone could see. James, the pillar of strength throughout the ordeal, admitted in later interviews that it wasn't his own mistreatment that haunted him. It was the look in his children's eyes. They were terrified, he said quietly, his voice heavy with emotion. No child should have to learn about the world's ugliness like that, especially not on Christmas. Maria struggled to find peace in the weeks that followed. It wasn't just about that one night, she explained. It's about what it meant. It's about knowing that no matter how much good you do in life, some people will see your skin before they see your humanity. Her words resonated with many who had experienced similar injustices, sparking a wave of stories shared across social media. For Marcus and Ava, the incident marked the end of their innocence. Marcus, once so full of questions about the world, now asked different ones. Why did they think we didn't belong, Ava? The artist stopped drawing for weeks, unable to find joy in the hobby that once lit up her world. But amidst the pain, the Smiths found purpose. They used their platform to speak out not just for themselves, but for every family that had faced similar injustices. This wasn't just about us, James said in a public statement. This is about a system that needs to change. It's about accountability, and it's about ensuring no one else has to go through what we did. The incident quickly became a flashpoint in the broader conversation about systemic racism and law enforcement. Activists pointed to it as yet another example of how bias can lead to catastrophic mistakes. The Smith story became a rallying cry, fueling debates about police reform and the urgent need for better training and accountability. Lawmakers were forced to take notice, with some pushing for legislation aimed at addressing racial profiling and abuse of power. Protesters carried signs bearing the Smith family's name, their voices echoing through the streets. This isn't just their fight, one demonstrator said. It's all of ours. The Smiths, though unwilling symbols of a much larger issue, refused to let the incident define them. Instead, they turned their pain into a powerful call for justice, one that continues to inspire change and push the nation toward a future where equality isn't just an ideal, but a reality. The Smith family's story is a stark reminder of the work we still need to do. Incidents like this don't just happen in isolation. They are a symptom of a larger problem that affects countless lives every day. Awareness is the first step toward change, and by shining a light on stories like these, we can start to dismantle the prejudice and systemic flaws that allow such injustices to persist. But awareness alone isn't enough. It's up to all of us to push for accountability and advocate for justice. Reflect on what happened to this family and consider how we can build a society where no one has to fear being judged or mistreated simply because of the color of their skin. If this story moved you or made you think, don't let it end here. Share it with others, spark conversations, and keep the momentum going. Together, we can create a world where equality and fairness are more than just words. And before you go, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue bringing stories like this to light and fighting for the change we all deserve. Let's make a difference one story at a time.